Hello everyone and welcome to our complimentary webinar today, Difference Between Calibration and Verification. We're excited to have you with us and thank you again for registering. Let me go ahead and introduce our presenter today, Oscar Combs. Oscar Combs is a senior consultant of the ISO 9001 group. Oscar has over 25 years of experience providing consulting, auditing, and training to organizations such as AT&T, Hewlett-Packard, Kawasaki, BASF, Halliburton, DHL, and numerous other medium and small-size organizations throughout the United States and abroad. Oscar holds an MBA from the University of Houston and is an exemplar certified lead auditor and principal management consultant. So everyone, let's welcome Oscar and go ahead and begin our presentation for today.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Oscar Combs here. Victoria, thank you so much for that great introduction. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending this webinar. I think it's a very important topic, and I hope to share some value with you on today. So our topic today is about calibration versus verification of your gauges or any of your monitoring and measuring equipment. And so, of course, we have several standards that give us requirements such as ISO 9001 for our quality management system and API Spec Q1 if you're in the oil and gas field, or AS 9100 for aerospace. So just kind of focusing on those three, but these requirements are in a lot of other management system standards as well. And these standards require organizations to calibrate or verify their monitoring and measuring equipment. But what I've seen over my 25 plus years, when I go into various organizations, I see organizations spend a lot of money just collecting all of their devices and sending it out for calibration. I'm not sure if your organization does that or not, but if you do, I wanted to bring some attention to the actual verbiage of the clauses that deal with this and how it gives us some other options as well. So I feel like this could really help your organization save some significant amounts of money when it comes to calibrating your equipment. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the requirements, the difference between calibration and verification, when it's appropriate to verify versus calibrate, and how you can save money on your calibration program. All right, so before we get started, just like to share a little bit more about our organization, the ISO 9001 group. We are a consulting, auditing, and training company. We're headquartered here in Houston, Texas. We have regional offices throughout Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, New York, and Portland. So this gives us the ability to provide services to all of our clients throughout the U.S. And we also, really just focus on helping your organization improve its operations and reduce the risk. That's the mission of our company. And our consultants, they have over 25 years of experience in doing that. And just like many of you, our company is ISO 9001 certified, and we are accredited by the Better Business Bureau. We have an A+ rating. So, I feel like that's very important to mention so that you can know who we are. And when I'm giving you some recommendations here, that you know that they come from a place of experience. Also, I would encourage you to subscribe and follow us on your favorite social media, whether that's LinkedIn. We have this video here will also be posted on our YouTube channel. So we're on social media. You go look for us, the ISO 9001 group, and you're going to get a lot of content just like this. And I would want to encourage you to stay logged in for the entire session here. You will have an opportunity to enter your questions in the chat feature. So just if during the presentation and you have a question, just enter it into the chat. We'll get to it at the end of the webinar where we'll have our question and answer session. So I encourage you to stay logged in because you don't want to miss that portion of the webinar. All right, let's get down to business here. So when it comes to this issue of calibration or verification of our monitoring and measuring equipment, I always like to go back to the source. And the source here is looking at the clauses of these standards. So I chose three standards here: ISO 9001 2015, which is exactly the same as AS 9100D, exact same clause number. And if you know about the whole transition from ISO 9001 2008 and 2015 and the Annex SL in regards to ISO merging all of the numbering systems from 1 to 10 basically, and AS 9100, that was one of the main revisions from C to D, was to align AS 9100 with the new numbering system. So that's why both of those standards, the clause for monitoring and calibration is 7.1.5.2, measurement traceability. So let's read it. It says, when measurement traceability is a requirement or is considered by the organization to be an essential part of providing confidence in the validity of measurement results, measuring equipment shall be, and of course there's more, and I just took an excerpt from the section that's applicable to our topic today. It says, A, calibrated, or, this is very key, and this is, when you're reading standards, you have to really pay attention to the language. It says or, which means option, right? Calibrated or verified. Another or here, or both, or calibrated or verified, or you can do them both, calibrate and verify. All right, next thing, part of that clause, it says that it should be done at specified intervals. It actually doesn't say annual. So a lot of companies just do it annually, just, I guess, because they just get in the habit of doing that annually. And of course, calibration companies love you for doing it annually. That's, some revenue that they can count on every year. But really, you should look at it from the perspective of what the OEM requires. All right, but a lot of people interpret that to be on an annual basis, so no problem. Or it says, or prior to use. So prior to using the device, right? So you can see a lot of options there. Now, it says, against measurement standards traceable to international or national measurement standards. When no such standard exists, the basis used for calibration or, again, verification shall be retained as documented information. All right, so we can see here that the standard clearly says calibrated or verified. There is no and in there. All right, so moving on to API Spec Q1, Clause 5.8, control of testing, measuring, and monitoring equipment. It reads that the organization shall maintain a documented procedure in order to ensure that testing, measurement, and monitoring equipment is calibrated and maintained. The procedure shall include requirements for the specific equipment type that addresses, and again, I just took out the part that deals with our topic today, but again, we see that common language in here where it says calibration or verification method, including adjustment and readjustment as necessary. All right, so always go to the actual standards when you're trying to interpret things or get a better understanding. But we clearly see here that all three of these standards have the or, calibrated, or verified as the requirement. So what's the difference between calibration and verification? All right, so calibration is the process of comparing an unknown value to a known value, right? So a calibration laboratory will check your instrument at several points through its range and make adjustments to bring the instrument into alignment with the standard if it is found to be out of tolerance. That's very key. They will make adjustments if it's found to be out of tolerance, right? A lot of organizations are sending equipment to the calibration lab that has not been found to be out of tolerance. And the calibration lab is reporting back to you, to your organization on their calibration cert, that everything checked out fine, no problems, no adjustments were made, item is still in calibration. Well, thank you, but all you did was pay for them to do your verification for you, right? You could have probably done that in-house. So verification is a process that is done periodically to ensure an instrument is working as it should be and that any error in its measurement is still within the tolerance for the application and what you're using it for. So unlike calibration, this process does not involve making any types of adjustments. More importantly, verification may not require comparison against a NIST standard. It is simply you checking against another piece of equipment to ensure that your instrument or your device is still measuring within tolerance, right? You can do that in-house. In many cases, you can do that in-house. Maybe you have some sophisticated equipment that you may not be able to do in-house, but I can guarantee you there's a lot of equipment that organizations can verify as opposed to sending it out for calibration. I mean, let's think about this for a second. So just think about you getting on a scale at your home to take your weight, your own weight in pounds, right? Okay, now you could go to the doctor on a weekly basis or however frequent you take your weight, monthly, annual. Hopefully, we're doing it more than annual. But you could go to the doctor every time and pay a fee to go to the doctor and get the weight, your weight. Or you could make sure that your scale is reading correctly, meaning verifying it, that your scale is reading correctly so that when you step on the scale at your home, that you can have confidence that it's giving you the correct weight, right? You could do that by maybe having what we call a standard to put on your scale at home. Let's say a 5-pound weight. If you put a 5-pound weight on your scale at home and it says 5 pounds, you've just verified that that scale is reading correctly. So there was no need for you to go to the doctor and get your weight or send your scale out for calibration at home, because with that 5-pound weight that you know is exactly 5 pounds, and when you put it on there, it reads 5 pounds, you've just verified. So that's a really simple example of the difference between calibration and verification. Now, if you put that 5-pound weight on your scale at home and it's not reading correctly, but even that scale has a tolerance, a plus or minus within a certain range that it's acceptable. If it's outside of that range, yeah, then you may look at taking your scale at home to a calibration or a repair facility or whatever or may just replace it, right? May just be cheaper to just get a new one. All right. So hopefully with that simple analogy there, you've been able to grasp the whole difference between verification versus calibration and how you can really save your company a lot of money when it comes to sending things out for calibration. So some things that we should maybe some questions we should possibly ask ourselves: when should we use verification versus calibration? One question may be, is the measurement tolerance of your device known? If it's known, if the tolerance of your micrometer or caliper or your scale, if it's known, Well, okay. Now you can verify it, right? You maybe you would, if you didn't know what the parameters were, the tolerance, the plus or minus, then yeah, you maybe want to send it out for calibration to establish that tolerance. But if you already know that, all you really need to do is verification. Another thing to think about is the measurement tolerance of your device unknown. Of course, if it's unknown, calibration. We need it to be calibrated so that we can establish the tolerance to a standard, to a standard. Another thing to think about. Do you have an in-house standard that has been calibrated to a recognized standard? In the ISO and other standards, it always refers us back to NIST, that you can use to verify your device is measuring within its measurement tolerance. For example, could be gauge block or weight. We have some examples over here of some gauge blocks over here. Now, these gauge blocks, of course, would need to be calibrated by an outside source. So then you could go and use these gauges, these blocks, to measure your device, to verify your device. Or these scales, I mean, these weights here, you could easily put these weights onto your scales because these weights would be calibrated. And then you could verify your scale using these calibrated standards. Okay. Now, here's something else to think about. So, up on verification, is the device measuring properly within its measurement tolerance? Okay, we put these weights on the scale, or we use these blocks to measure with our caliper, and it's measuring correctly within the tolerance. Why would I send that out for calibration? It's calibrated. It's reading properly. It's within tolerance. That's verification. So why would I want to send that out just on a routine basis, on an annual basis, if it's reading properly? If somebody drops a device, yeah, we still need to go back and verify. If it's reading properly, there's no need to send it out for calibration because there's no adjustments needed. What about this? So up on verification, the device is no longer measuring properly within its measurement tolerance, and it requires some adjustment. That's calibration. Then I need to go send it out for calibration because when I tried to verify it, it was not reading within tolerance, and now there needs to be some adjustments. Now, you shouldn't be adjusting your equipment unless you are qualified to do that. If you are a calibration lab or you have internal expertise and the equipment to do that, but if it's reading properly and there's no adjustments necessary, that's verification. All right. So let's see here. Let's talk about how this can save your company money, how you can save money with a verification program. So what I've seen over my years is I've seen organizations they have a big list of, some companies have like a couple hundred or 500 different devices depending upon the size of your company or what you are using, what you're manufacturing. They just have it all on an inventory and on a calibration schedule is what I've seen in many cases. And so once a year, they just load up all of their equipment, or they have the calibration company come into their company and they get to calibrating. Well, in many cases, the calibration company is just, the first thing they're going to do is that they're going to verify that your equipment is reading properly. And if it's not reading properly, they're simply going to give you another calibration certificate and saying, the measurement when you brought it in and the measurement after they did their work, and if it's the same, You just paid the calibration lab to just verify for you, which you could have done in-house yourself if you have the gauges to do that or the standards to do that internally. So the only time we should be, of course, sending devices out for calibration is after you verify that it's no longer measuring within tolerance. If your device is verified as measuring within tolerance, all you have to do is implement a verification program, document all the things that you would typically see on a calibration certificate, and you've just saved your company a lot of money on an annual basis. You may be able to reduce your calibration costs by 25 up to maybe even 50%. So you guys go and run your numbers and see how much money you spent on your calibration last year or the year before or whatever, or even this year. And think about all of the devices that you just gather up and you just send out on a routine basis, just like clockwork. And you haven't internally tried to verify those things, but just send it out for calibration. Well, we clearly see that the standard, I gave you 3 standards where it says calibration or verification is totally acceptable. So your verification program still has to be stringent, right? You have to identify your verification method. So as in the example I gave was putting a standard, a calibrated weight on a scale, whatever the method is, or using a gauge block that was calibrated. Secondly, you still need to have the identification of the standard that you use. So that weight that you use needs to still have a number, needs to be traceable. It needs to be verified and calibrated that it is the exact weight that is reported. It should have your standard that you use for verification should have its own calibration certificate. You should identify what the measurement tolerance was, the plus and minus, the range. You should document the actual measurement that the device gave when you did your verification. Did it pass or fail? You should list that on your verification record, date, time, who did it. And you still need to identify, put labels on your equipment that it was verified, when it was verified, so people that are using the device can see that it was verified. Did it need to be calibrated? Well, let's go back. We said it only needed to be calibrated if it was not reading properly. But at minimum, you need to have a verification label on it. And you can see all of these additional requirements that's required on a calibration certificate in 17025, which is the standard that a calibration lab would use if they were calibrating your equipment. You can go purchase that standard. Look at clause 7.8.4, and you can list all of those things on your verification document. All right, so hopefully I've been able to really explain in a practical way that in many cases, the equipment that you're sending out for calibration, you can save yourself a lot of money by implementing a verification program. And if it's reading correctly when you verify it, you do not need to send it out for calibration. The only time you would need to send something out for calibration is after you verify it and it's not reading properly. Send it out for calibration. And I'm sure if you guys do that, you're going to see where you are going to save yourselves a lot of money on your calibration program. So hopefully you found this webinar beneficial. We do have some questions. And so I'll turn it back over to Victoria at this time.
Thanks, Oscar. I do have a few questions here. Question number one, will my certification body write me up for having a verification program?
You know what? They might write you up, but they should not write you up, because just like they write you up on many other things in your companies, it's based upon what they're used to seeing and their experiences, and they may have the same opinion that everything should just randomly be sent out for calibration. But what we should do is point them back to the standard where it says, Mr. Auditor, Mrs. Auditor, let's look at the standard here. It says that we can calibrate or verify or both, is what it says. So your certification body should not be writing you up for verification. Now, they should write you up if your devices are not reading properly and you hadn't sent them out for calibration, or they're not reading properly and you didn't implement a verification program. That would be a valid write-up. But you implementing a verification program, documenting your readings is within tolerance, and there was no need to send it out for calibration, and it's labeled. They should not write you up for that.
Wonderful, Oscar. Next question. Can we implement an in-house calibration program?
You know, if you're not a calibration laboratory, I would not recommend that you implement an in-house calibration program. You know, that's why you need to verify your equipment that it's reading properly. And if it's not reading properly, then we send it out to a calibration lab. So you don't want to become a calibration laboratory. That's not what we're encouraging. I'm encouraging you to verify your equipment. And if it's reading properly, don't send it out for calibration, because you're wasting money and time. But if it's not reading properly, send it out to a calibration lab that's accredited to maybe ISO 17025, and make sure that all of your standards that you're using to verify are also calibrated by a calibration lab. But no, I wouldn't recommend you becoming a calibration lab. I would recommend you focusing on verifying, implementing a verification program to save your company money on calibrations. All right, anything else?
Yes. Next question, how often should we calibrate or verify our devices?
Well, that's a good question. When it comes to your devices, I would recommend verifying your devices based upon how frequently you use them. So, for example, if you use something every day, maybe you want to verify it maybe on a monthly basis, or of course, people should be verifying things before they use them, right? So the operator should be verifying before they do their dimensional checks, right, for their final inspections. But maybe maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's semi-annual, maybe even annual. You know, so you probably want to do it. I would say somewhere between monthly and annual, whatever makes sense. But of course, the operator or the user of the equipment should be verifying before they use it, before every use. Another part of that I would say is, when it comes to calibration, how often you should calibrate. You know, as I mentioned, you know, many organizations just they lump everything together and just calibrate it on an annual basis. Well, you may want to look at the original equipment manufacturer's recommendations. If they say every year, that's great. But if you look in there, maybe it says every 3 years. Guess what? If the OEM says it needs to be calibrated every 3 years, and you're sending it out every year, you're just literally kind of wasting money. Unless in between that time frame you verified it and it's not reading properly, then you'd want to get it calibrated. All right. But again, just make sure that your standards that you use to verify internally, or at least send out for calibration on an annual basis. All right, any other questions?
Yes, it looks like we have 2 more questions. I'm not sure if we want to cover them now.
Yeah, we
Okay.
can. Let's see here. We got a couple more.
Perfect. So next question. Can you talk about performing an impact analysis if a gauge is found to be out of tolerance?
Well, I would say that's something that's maybe out of the scope of what we're discussing today. But of course, impact analysis, you would have to kind of determine the impact. That could mean a lot of different things. Not sure if you're talking about if you found something to be out of tolerance. I think that was the question, and you're still using it. Well, the standard says that you would need to go back and remeasure everything that you've used a uncalibrated device on, because it's not measuring properly. So maybe that's what the person means when they say an impact analysis, and the impact could be pretty significant. But see, this is another thing that I've seen companies do. Maybe the device is out of calibration only simply by date, meaning that it was due to be calibrated by October the 27th, 2020, and you're using it today, and by date, it appears to be out of calibration. But it's reading properly. If you verify it is reading properly, therefore means that it's actually in calibration. But that's where you kind of put yourself in that little box, because you set yourself up with an annual calibration versus verifying if the equipment is reading properly and then sending it out for calibration. So I think a lot of people are having these impacts based upon the date level, and the equipment is actually reading properly. All right. Any other questions? So we have one more thing. We got time for one more.
Yes, let's see. Our last question here. Tools that are verified in-house with an NIST standard, should they be called verification certificates? Will auditors question this?
No, auditors will not question your verification program. Some may, but again, as I explained in the very first question, you want to make sure your verification program is also following these requirements. I referred you to ISO 17025 as well. So as long as your verification program is very well documented, you have all of these things on your verification report, or you can call it a certificate if you would like. It's really a report if you do it in-house, not a certificate, because to issue certificates, you have to be accredited to issue a certificate. So I would say you probably want to call it a verification report or a record of some sort, and that should suffice. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions. I really appreciate you guys tuning in, and make sure you're tuning in for our future webinars. And go, like I said, go check us out on our YouTube, and follow us on LinkedIn. I'll turn it back over to Victoria at this time.
So thank you again, everyone, for attending and joining us today. You can feel free to reach out to us at 832-326-9796 or via email at info@iso9001group.com if you have any additional questions about our topic today. Be sure to like us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and other social media channels to stay up to date on when our next complimentary webinar will be. This complimentary webinar will be available on our website and YouTube channel for your use. Thank you and have a quality day.